it's so rare for Christie's to feature a living artist in the primary sale, period, that if and when they do, people just assume that Christie's has done their homework and their due diligence. They're all about making money. They are not going to waste their time putting up for auction things that are unlikely to do anything. It's just a blessing. It's like an insignia having them behind you.
I'm Mark Cook, president of Windfall Partners. We get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. After turnarounds as chief executive, the largest ever studies of award-winning leaders, a New York Times bestseller, and 5-star keynotes. I've coached 4,000 client wins at top brands. My Bold Encounters is an advanced system for leading. First, powerful steps on a path forward. Second, problem-solving skills that beat obstacles fast. Now, lead with Bold Encounters today.
Welcome to Bold Encounters. I'm Mark Cook. In this second part of our conversation with Daniel Ambrosi, he opens up about how breakthrough moments in his process and in his purpose led to a level of recognition that most artists have never achieved. If you're ready to build something real and lead the work that truly matters, you're about to hear from the best what it takes. Welcome back to Bold Encounters.
Architecture was a 5-year program, which I took 6 years to do because I did a special thesis to get me into the lab, his program, which was another 2 years. So I was at Cornell for 8 straight years from 1976 to 1984, walking away with a Bachelor of Architecture degree and a master's in 3D graphics. I spent 10 years in the architecture world, working for a large commercial firm in Seattle, before moving on to the next 2 of my careers before moving into fine art.
What were they? Tell us those before you go to New York. Let's hear what those were.
So I was really early in architecture for CAD and computer graphics. It was still really hard to get architects to put down their pencils and pick up a keyboard. So I stuck it out.
Was Evans, let me just ask you this because you just moved here. Was Evans and Sutherland ever involved with that? They were kind of a pioneer in computer graphics, and I thought it was in both cars and architecture.
Yeah, University of Utah had a huge presence in the field. At the lab, when I joined as an undergraduate, we already had a half dozen Evans and Sutherland picture systems.
Really?
So we were a huge customer of ENS, and in fact, if you go to the Program of Computer Graphics homepage at Cornell University, the first picture you see is a picture of me in 1981 wearing a beard. I had a beard at the time, not a good beard, in front of an Evans and Sutherland picture system.
Really? Wow.
Yep.
So I'm dear friends with his son. Of course, he's passed, but his son Peter Evans and I published
great.
a magazine, and his daughter is my neighbor. So
that's so
it's
awesome.
I know a little bit about them. Okay, keep going. Sorry, I didn't mean to derail you there. I was just so curious. You said you were doing that in architecture, and I thought
so some of my the Program of Computer Graphics was an interdisciplinary lab. We had students from all walks, architecture, engineering, and one was an entomologist, an insect scientist, structural engineer, all sorts of different people. Even the architects, for the most part, had the good sense when they got out of college to go work for places like Industrial Light and Magic or Lucasfilm or Silicon Graphics, and I stupidly stuck to my guns. I'm going to light the world of architecture on fire with 3D graphics. And man, that was pushing on a rope. My friends were getting paid super well, having the times of their lives. And ultimately, after about 10 years of sweating in this architecture firm, which is a great firm, it's an amazing firm, I made a career transition with the help of my graduate school colleagues into a marketing position at Silicon Graphics. And that started 10 years of being a tech marketing person, mostly at the director level. And then in 2003, after that whole stint, I went independent with my wife as small business owners, running a marketing consultancy where we did marketing communications projects on a project by project basis. She's still doing that. I pretty much stopped doing that and focused on the art completely when COVID hit in 2020, but had been for 9 years prior to that burning the candle at both ends with the art project. Mm. But I went full-time on the art in 2020 and have been focused on that ever since.
Yeah, that's terrific. What do you think? I want to get a couple of lessons in here since we're here and before we go to Parks or to New York City. So you moved around. You talked about your friends being lucky. There's a few things you learn, not about wealth or gaining money necessarily, although if you want it to be that, that's fine, but about fulfilling your life's career, to turn your career into a calling. You've had some lessons during that switching about and the progression. Tell us a few of those, at least two or three.
A couple big things stand out. One is, if you're really unhappy with how you're spending 8 hours or more per day in your work life, it's probably a sign that you need to look at something, that something's not right and that you're maybe not in the right place. And so I didn't have a master plan that would, I couldn't have predicted that I would have taken this route. In hindsight, none of it was wasted. Every single one of these steps has fed into and is feeding into the work I'm doing today. I could not be doing the work I'm doing today had I not done those steps. And I couldn't have been doing it any earlier because the technology wasn't ready for me anyway. So one thing I learned was, when making career transitions from one career to another, it's a lot easier to do that stepwise, 1 foot at a time. So in other words, moving from CAD manager at an architecture firm to a product manager at a graphics workstation company there's enough overlap in there in terms of the communication skills you need to have and the knowledge you need to have and all this stuff, that it was truly like stepping 1 foot in to get into this next place and then bringing that other foot in, and now you're over here. And all of my career transitions have been like that. They've been like, okay, now to go from a product manager, director of marketing in tech firms to being a marketing consultant in tech and biotech is, again, 1 step over, and the next thing you know, you got both feet over, and now you're over here, which is quite removed from here, which you couldn't do in 1 step very easily. It'd be really hard to do that.
Or in one hop, so to speak. Like, it sounds like you're describing rock climbing. And, just make sure if you want to head somewhere, make sure you have 1 foot solid, and you might have a chance to move the other foot, right?
Right. That's exactly how it worked out. So that's the big takeaway is, I guess, 2 big takeaways. One is, if you're really miserable, you need to pay attention and figure out what's going on there. And what might be a better way to go. And then in terms of effectuating that, doing it incrementally is going to help a lot.
Take a step. Don't hop. Just take a step. You'll get the other one later. Yeah. Great advice. Super great advice. Okay, tell us about New York City before we
here's
start
another
winding up.
give you another little narrative on how this whole thing unfolded. Which is, one thing leads to another. I could even go back to NVIDIA. The first exhibition of my work, of my dreamscapes, the AI-augmented stuff, was when NVIDIA, through the guy that helped develop the software for me, when he saw what I was doing, he's like, this stuff printed large would make quite the splash at the annual GPU technology conference that NVIDIA puts on. By the way, I first started, I guess it was like January 31st of 2016 when I had my first batch of artworks to show these guys, right? And it was in that week, right there, very beginning of February, where Chris from NVIDIA is like, we should try to get these in the conference. I'm like, when's the conference? He goes, it's in April. I'm like, I do a lot of event marketing. I know how long it takes to plan major conferences. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. He goes, well, let me find out. I'm like, when is it happening in April? He goes, April 1st. I'm like, that's not going to happen. No way. And it happened. I had 3 large pieces in there, developed a relationship with folks at NVIDIA. I got to meet Jensen, the billionaire founder, CEO. He was blown away by the work. He really loved it. And then got invited subsequent years, I think for like 4 total times, into the NVIDIA AI Art Gallery. You can still, it's a permanent gallery online. You can see my pieces there, and interviews, panel discussions with other notable AI artists, and so on. The woman who curates that, who's the head of AI art curation at NVIDIA, is this fabulous woman, Heather Scholl, who happened to be in London doing some kind of executive MBA thing or something when my solo show was happening.
Oh.
With the freshness of that show in her mind, when Christie's approached her about what artists would you recommend for this first ever of its kind AI art sale, Heather had this, in her mind of, again, luck, right? She happened to be there. She saw these incredible giant backlit artworks in this beautiful gallery. I made a deeper impression on someone who was already impressed, enough to be elevated above all of the other artists that have been in the NVIDIA AI Art Gallery, to be among the few that she recommended to Christie's. And that led to the Christie's thing. So I thanked her profusely. Again, gratitude. It's like, Heather, I know it was you. I know this wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for you, because she was the one that made the introduction to the digital art director at Christie's. So the piece that we submitted for Christie's was a Central Park scene that has generated a lot of other stuff that's happened since then. For one thing, on the strength of that piece, one of the most important corporate art buyers in America, who buys art for the permanent collection in one of the big 4 banks, ended up acquiring, and they're getting delivered tomorrow to New York, 2 6x8 foot Central Park pieces for the corporate collection in their flagship client service center, which is moving this summer into a brand new 70-story skyscraper in Midtown Manhattan. And I got to see this collection. It's ridiculous. First of all, I'm going to have 2 pieces, not 1, on this floor that are going to be among the larger pieces there, amidst Picassos and Lichtensteins and Basquiat's and Warhols and all sorts, and me. It's like, yeah, it's crazy. But but that Christie's thing gave me the legitimization, and that's the other thing I want to come back to real quick. I thought the second lottery ticket, which is the champion of such repute that no one can doubt your legitimacy anymore, was Robilant and Villena, right? And yet, when the show happened, the timing and whatnot, despite how well covered it was, we didn't really quite get the sales. Why? Because I think that they were not the second lottery ticket. They, like Brian Epstein was for the Beatles, get you to the second lottery ticket, which was Decca Records, who signed the Beatles first to their. That's the lottery ticket. Robilant and Voena, their pedigree is what got me to Christie's. Christie's is the lottery ticket. Let me ask you this. Have you ever heard of Robilant and Voena Gallery before?
No.
Have you ever heard of Christie's Auction House before?
Yeah.
Right?
I've heard,
okay, that's the difference.
Yeah.
So the Christie's thing, now that paved the way for this corporate art buyer at this Big Four bank to buy two of my pieces. What happened there is absolutely crazy.
Let me ask you about that first. I want to ask you that because you spent time doing marketing. And so I want to ask you this question, and it is that, yes, Robilant and Voena, maybe none of us have heard of it, that are not in the art world. Certainly with one sentence, you convinced me they're the real deal when you talked about what they do. But it's interesting when you're in a creative space and you're passionate, even in my line of work, you can pursue passion that has no commercial possibility. Not a incredibly low probability like many of us that do this. But there are so many people that pursue a passion that has zero commercial possibility. This should be a hobby maybe. And it's interesting to me that Christie's is kind of all about the commercial part of it, isn't it? So isn't part of that second lottery ticket to invest a little bit in people that might be connected to people that have some commercial channel or vehicle or something?
So I think the key characteristic about what makes an effective champion to be called this second lottery ticket that essentially earns you the trifecta of all three Boy Scout badges needed to get somewhere in this field, right?
Yeah.
Merit badges, right? Yeah. By definition has to be of such repute that no one doubts anymore. So it's so rare for Christie's to feature a living artist in the primary sale, period, that if and when they do, people just assume that Christie's has done their homework and their due diligence. They're all about making money. They are not going to waste their time putting up for auction things that are unlikely to do anything. Is it imprimatur? What's the word they use for? I mean, it's just a blessing. It's like an insignia having them behind you. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, they're experts at getting the people in a room that find what is being displayed incredibly valuable, and they're also expert at providing that offering so that they can own it. Right? I mean, they're experts at that, and there might be other people that give you the trophy to get that second lottery ticket, but maybe not quite as expert at selling your particular thing and quite as expert at finding your audience. Christie's is gonna do the job. So is Sotheby's, right?
Yeah, and case in point, Christie's is what attracted the former CEO and president of Sotheby's to see and buy my work.
Yeah. And
this corporate art buyer from one of the Big Four banks to buy my work as well. So
I mean, if you're a corporate leader and you're saying what art should we put in our corporate place, the CEO of Sotheby's is probably a good iconic reference, even if it's in your own mind, right? That's someone you probably.
Right. So for the person, so this is another interesting story how the bank thing worked, because that leads to the solo show. So this woman basically said, I'm not allowed to commission an artwork, but Fred, the director of Robolant and Valena's New York City gallery, and by the way, did I mention I signed a 3-year exclusive with Robolant and Valena, so that's why I'm still with them. I'm exclusively represented by them for another year.
That's
it's
terrific.
Been 2 years. So Fred is their new gallery director in New York. He's awesome, very knowledgeable of art history, and I'm so delighted that he feels so strongly about my work. It didn't have to go that way, but fortunately it did. So he's been a real champion, and he made the introduction to the corporate art buyer at this Big Four bank that he knows personally. She got really excited, and she said, okay, I'm not allowed to commission you, but Fred told me that when you shot the park, when you did your photo expedition back in 2013, you covered every square foot of the park. Is that true? I'm like, yep, that is true. She goes, okay, so here's what I want you to do. I want you to make 10 6x8 foot artworks from which I will choose 2. I'm like, okay, I'll do that. So I went back to work. I went back to the original source photography at the frame level, remastered it from scratch, knowing all the things I've learned in the last 12 years, and created 10 artworks for her to look at. And I actually sat on them for a couple weeks to kind of make sure I had them where I wanted them to be, while my gallery's starting to ping me, how's it going? Do you have anything to show this woman yet? How's it going? Finally I said, okay, I think I'm ready. Here we go. I was really nervous because honestly, I think I had looked at the work too much and I was starting to have a crisis of confidence. And so I sent it out first to my gallery and said, well, here it is. Let me know what you think. And right away, the New York City gallery director came back with, these are amazing, in all caps with exclamation points, right? And then the other guys, my other 2 key associates were like, fantastic, these are absolutely amazing, and blah, blah, blah. They loved them. So that was a relief. I'm happy to report that the banker lady picked the 2 works I hoped she would, the 2 strongest works, which is great. I wanted to put my best foot forward, and it was her choice, but I'm really happy that she chose the 2 that I hoped she would. But the other 8 were really good too, and plus we have a 9th potentially from because the piece that the Sotheby's guy bought from the Christie show is an edition of 5. It's a small limited edition, so I can make more of that. And there was one other scene that I really wanted to make in that set of 10 for this person that I couldn't get the cropping to work at 6x8. But because I was no longer constricted to that format for this potential show, I went ahead and went back and cropped it at its ideal proportion. And I basically, after we got the banker all squared away, I said to my gallery guys, I said, okay, so I'm so glad that you like the other pieces. I think we've got some momentum here between Christie's and Sotheby's and Todd. I'm sorry, not Todd. I'm not supposed to say names. His name isn't Todd. So I got lucky there. I made a mistake with his name and it's not him anyway. I'm not supposed to say it. But I said, how about a New York City solo show with the other works? And after a little bit of discussion and way too much waiting for my impatient self, they came back and said, yeah, let's do it. In fact, let's do it in October, which is, again, the best time of year in the art world to stage a solo show. And I'm super stoked. It's my first solo show in New York City. I'm originally from New York
So
City. It'll
great.
be quite the homecoming. Um, I'm pinching myself. The press release is done. There's one change we may make to one of the images, but it's imminent. It'll be coming out any day now. Um, and then we got the Sotheby's auction coming up second week of July, which who knows how that'll go. That's a digital only piece. The NFT market is really hurting right now, so I don't know what to expect there, but even being included again is enough of an honor that if nothing happens, I'll still be happy. But we'll see.
Yeah, that's terrific. Okay, I want to do a couple of things. I want to set up. We talked earlier. We're scheduling a part 2 because this is in fact a visual medium, and so we're going to join each other. We'll hold back where it's really exciting. We're going to go see some art, and you're going to explain the story behind it, the process behind it, and make me appreciate it even more than I do the second I see it. I also want to point out a couple of things that I noticed, and won't take the time to do it now, but we'll do it then. I noticed when I looked at your art, there's these amazing images that you think there are parts that are real, and then you zoom in and they're like made out of paisley designs and things that there's no chat GPT art in the world that's doing what you're doing, because you have the only Google tool that exists, it sounds like. But I also noticed that there are little pieces that are real, that are within rare images I caught a couple of actual people that don't seem to be generated to me. Then I also noticed this. I also noticed that you're quite a master at finding a very interesting creative context, probably because of your background and the mind you were born with. But like the different times and different days of the same landscape pictured and then layered in stripes, and then having your tool reimagine it. We're going to talk about that in part 2 and in your thinking and process. And I think what is incredibly valuable, whether you want to be an artist or not, is a discussion on how to use AI and how to just approach as a layperson images and AI in general. And you're such an incredible resource on that. Now we're switching it up a bit. From here in our remote studios, we're both going to head up to Lunds Fine Art Gallery in Park City, Utah, where Daniel will walk us through his work in person while it's hanging on the walls in the Fine Art Studio. If you're listening, now's the perfect time to check out our show and this second episode of Daniel on Spotify or YouTube, because it's going to be very visual and it's worth seeing video. Thank you. I'll see you up there.
Welcome, Mark, to Lunds Fine Art Gallery at 591 Main Street in Park City. Alan Lund is from a family of great artists. He's a master impressionist. His parents were painters. His son, Ethan, is also a painter and has work in the gallery now. From what I understand, this gallery started as a namesake gallery for showcasing Alan's work, but over the years he has started to introduce the work of other artists that he feels an affinity to, one of which, as of a few weeks ago, is myself, and I'm proud to be in such a nice gallery on Main Street here. These bold and colorful paintings here are by Alan's son, Ethan. I think they're a wonderfully fresh take on Impressionism. Also, you'll see around the gallery a lot of sculptures, ceramics, jewelry, even furniture. Alan tells me that everything in the gallery is for sale, if that's something that people are interested in.
Well, I had the chance to meet him. I've been in this gallery before, and I had a long conversation with Ethan, and he was such a creative mind and knew so much about other people's work. What an advantage to sit and work in a gallery where major pieces come through and learn all about these artists from them, as Ethan did, working with his dad in the gallery.
I haven't met Ethan yet, but I think it's fair to say that Alan would not have his son's work in here if it wasn't really strong and fresh. It offers a whole new generational take on Impressionism with its just extreme, large palette knife, I suppose, driven brushstrokes and great color and form. I think it's really awesome. And in fact, some of Alan's frequent collectors, I've been told, have asked for collaboration pieces where these works were done by both Alan and his son together, which is really cool, I think. I'd like to talk for a minute about this incredible artist, Carl Kunz. Very versatile, was actually a fashion photographer with considerable success, and ultimately got interested in painting, and Alan actually mentored him in that direction. Carl is the reason I met Alan in the first place. He was having an opening here a few months ago, and he just happened to be walking on the sidewalk across the street, and I was really taken by the amazing shirt he had on, and I struck up a conversation. And when he told me who he was and what he was doing, I mentioned I was an artist as well and have a big piece in the local real estate office just down the street, which when he saw it, he was so wowed, he introduced me to Alan and asked Alan to go take a look at this, and the rest is history. But Carl is incredibly versatile. He's done these amazing, I think, really jazzy paintings, of which I think this is a spectacular example. I almost hear bebop music when I see this piece. But he also did this incredible sculpture here, which from what I understand is a very difficult process that's highly toxic and requires wearing a mask and everything when he does this. He's done a series of renditions of famous album covers, and I just have to talk about this for a second. Just 2 nights ago, I saw Jason Bonham's Led Zeppelin Evening at the Deer Valley Concert Arena. And the next day, which was just yesterday, I ran into the lead singer, whose name is James Dillon, and we ended up having a half-hour conversation about his art, my art, and of course Led Zeppelin. When I brought him in here to see my art, he saw this and was just delighted. We got pictures in front of it, and that he's going to be sharing with his bandmates. It was a very serendipitous moment to run into him and have that time with him. So this piece here, depicting Geronimo, I think is a museum-worthy piece. It's not only beautifully painted, but it's a very powerful portrait of a tragic figure in American history. Talk about family. Carl told me that his father, who's like, I think 90 years old or something, actually handmade this frame and this plaque at the bottom. And he came to the opening as well. And another case of this wonderful, family lineage of art and creativity, which was really nice to see.
Let me ask you something about that. You said he was 90 years old. It just brings up a point about creativity and artistry and that profession. A lot of us go sit at a desk, do emails, shuffle papers, sell, whatever we're doing, make sure the production's going okay with the metrics. But it tends to be something in art where it's something in their soul they're trying to get out for humanity and God or something. And 90 years old, tell me about retiring at 90 years old.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't know Carl's dad, but in terms of maintaining your creativity throughout life and later, I myself started with this art career, my fourth career, just 14 years ago, and at 67 years of age right now, I'm just hitting my stride, and I have a lot left in me, so age is not a factor, as Grandma Moses would tell us all. So as I said, I think Alan is a master impressionist. These works are just some examples of the amazing output that he's had over the years. I love how much they capture the realism of the scene, but in such a sort of moody, colorful way that just really gives the feeling of a place. The atmospheric haze that you see in some of these. He's not afraid to experiment with different finishes to create interesting crackling effects and so on. But he's just a really amazing painter, in my opinion. So net, the extraordinary challenges of not just being an artist, but also of running a fine art gallery on the very expensive Main Street in Park City is not for the faint of heart and requires, I think, considerable discipline, patience, and like I like to say, gratitude for the opportunities to be in such an amazing place and delight so many guests and visitors and art collectors. So this collection of 12 artworks on the wall here is what I'm displaying at Lunds Gallery. What I'd really like to start with is this piece down here, which is the foundation of my entire artistic journey. It's actually the genesis piece of what started me on this endeavor. The reason I call this my genesis piece is it's really where my first big breakthrough in this artistic journey started. I did not set out to become an artist. I was just trying to find a better way to capture what I was experiencing in great landscapes. I'd been experimenting for years, literally, with computational photography techniques like high dynamic range photography and panoramic photography to try to find that elusive way to capture a landscape more closely to how humans experience it. When I got to this location, it was a classic case of necessity being the mother of invention. There was literally no other way to capture this very challenging scene without pulling together all of the techniques I had been experimenting with over the years into a single technique that I call XYZ photography. This is actually 60 photos stitched and blended together. It's 4 views wide by 3 views high by 5 exposures from dark to light. And what that does is it helps me sort of force my camera to see the world the way humans see, with a much wider field of view, a much more dynamic range in terms of seeing things that are both in deep shadow and in very bright areas. And as you know, with healthy eyes, everywhere we turn, we see with great detail. This was so challenging because there's no way with an ordinary camera to get a wide angle enough view, because right behind me was the opposite canyon wall. I'm pointed into the sun, which is rising right above in this blue area, totally blown out, highly overexposed. The alcove itself, this is the double arch alcove in Kolob Canyon, part of Zion National Park here in Utah, was in deep shadow. So really, in order to experience what I was experiencing, and one of the most important things is the electric light that happens when bright sun illuminates an orange rock wall behind you and reflects orange-colored light onto an orange-colored wall in shadow. That wall becomes electric with a double hit of colored light. Even though it's indirectly lit, it still glows. That's the experience you actually have in the real world. And when I finally hit upon this and saw the results, I decided this is something I should maybe really pursue with, a much higher level of discipline and possibly make a business out of it. So you'll probably notice of all the pieces here, this is the only one that hasn't been augmented with artificial intelligence. That's because it was the first of 2 breakthroughs that I had over this artistic journey. The AI didn't come along until 4 years later. But what I was really trying to achieve is this. Great landscapes are not just seen. They also make you feel and they make you think. This was the breakthrough that I think got my photography beyond just something you see into something you feel. It almost feels like you can step right into it. You cannot do that with a single photograph. This computational photography technique that I use to kind of force the camera to see the world the way we see it was what really set me on the path and made me realize maybe I can get across the goal line stepwise. And this was the first step. From here, I spent 4 years refining that technique, trying to figure out what it was best at capturing. And it was only until the summer of 2015 when I saw the opportunity to take it to the next level into a 21st century impressionism with the artificial intelligence-based brushstrokes that we'll talk about next. What we're looking at here is a very close-up detail of a 40 by 40 inch backlit fabric print. This is a light box that is an early example of my AI dreaming, whereby there was one level of AI augmentation turning this photographic panorama of the Japanese tea garden in San Francisco into what I call a dreamscape. To see the dreaming details and this semi-hallucinatory way of rendering this, you have to be quite close. And as you'll notice when we zoom out, it almost appears just photographic from a distance. That transition causes kind of a cognitive break in people viewing this. From a distance, they think they're seeing a photograph, and when they get up close, they realize, oh my goodness, this is not what I thought it was at all. So that is one of the ways in which I believe I got over the goal line into not just making landscape images that are seen and that make people feel, but that also make people think. What is it I'm looking at? What is the nature of reality? How does my dog see this? We know that different species see the world in different ways. And that's part of what I'm trying to say with my Dreamscape collection. This piece is called Dream Scrolls. You know, I'm most enamored by the 400-year history of landscape painting in the Western world. But I've always also had a soft spot for the Eastern tradition of Chinese scroll painting. And this is my homage to that. This digital canvas, it's not a TV, it's a Samsung digital canvas, which is the kind of device they put in airports typically, very low energy. You leave it on all the time. It's beautiful 4K resolution and great color, wide viewing angles. It features 18 minutes of content spread across 9 different scenes I captured all over the world. This piece here was captured at the Killary Fjord in Ireland, for example. Each piece is a 2-minute video cascade that, if rolled out at this size, would be 17 feet high. It takes 2 minutes for the scene to scroll from top to bottom. And what I always loved about Chinese scroll painting, they're kind of meant to be read from the bottom to the top. When you're first looking at the bottom, you see the foreground, and it almost looks like you see a garden and perhaps a patio, and it looks almost like a two-dimensional texture. But as you raise your eyes, you start to see more out into the perspective of the long-distance view, and it somehow seamlessly transitions from a 2D texture to a 3D environment. And I managed to achieve that with this, which I'm really happy about. Each of the scenes fades in from white and then fades out to white, and the next scene will begin. So this is a good time to watch that transition and to see what happens when I try to explain how it goes from 2D to 3D. This is a scene captured at Lake Hawaii in the South Island of New Zealand. You'll see the foreground is very textural. It's just patterns of foliage and so on. But as the scene moves down and we look further into the depth of the scene, the three-dimensional space starts to reveal. And again, it just mystifies me that that transition happens so seamlessly and smoothly. Also, we talked about that contextual dreaming of the AI and how it does things differently. These patterns out here are so surreal, but because it doesn't want to lose the details, being part of an image recognition system, these trees down here are in sharp detail. That is just amazing to me. Same thing with the telephone wires, that those don't get lost at all. Again, it's an image recognition system. It doesn't want to lose any of the details. Now you can really see how that transition is occurring. We're going deep into the space, across the lake to the mountains beyond, and then finally up into the sky. And watch how the patterns change. We get from these little pointillist details to these spirals back to kind of almost a hexagonal honeycomb treatment, and then to spirals that have more of a square feature. It's just wonderful how, to me, that transition happens with this intelligent mark making that my AI is capable of, that I can direct, but I can't really control the details. And that's, again, why it's such a wonderful collaboration. Okay, we're going to talk about this 4x8 foot frontlit print. This artwork depicts the Fitzgerald Marine Reserve in Moss Beach, California. It is a frontlit print. It's not a light box. And the fact is, any of my fabric prints can be ordered as either backlit or non-lit, as they call it, at no difference in price. It costs me a little bit more to make it as a light box, but I don't like to nickel and dime my collectors. In both cases, these frames and light boxes are art containers. It's very easy to peel out a fabric print and put in a new one. So I also offer at 80% of the list price of a light box, just a print alone. So if someone wants to change up the art every few months, that's very easy and more affordable to do. Just a quick word about the differences between backlit and non-lit prints. The light boxes need to be a little bit thicker in profile, about 4 inches, to allow the light inside to disperse. And by the way, these light boxes have low energy LEDs, typically on 2 sides only, top and bottom or side and side. That's all you need to illuminate the entire print very evenly. The front lit prints or non-lit prints they don't require electrification, for one thing. They do require art lighting or a decently lit room to be seen well. And they feature a much thinner profile, more like 1 1/4 inches, which can be a more elegant look. So in this case, what I wanted to talk about with this artwork is that unlike the Japanese tea garden piece that you saw, which was an early example of a single pass dreamscape where there was one level of AI dreaming at a specific scale. This is what I call a double dose dreamscape. There are 2 passes of AI dreaming at 2 different scales and 2 different styles. You have the broad swoopy lines that are one layer of dreaming, so to speak, and within those there's another layer of cut up curlicues and form and detail. That is my way of saying, nature is such that the deeper you look, the more you see. Now, one of the great things about working with an AI like this is it's not a Photoshop filter. It's not that simple. It's very intelligent. It's part of an image recognition system that's trying to interpret what it's looking at. So it's contextual. It changes what it sees based upon what it's looking at. And in the process, it often makes decisions and creates outputs that surprise and delight me with a level of creativity that I wouldn't have thought of myself. For example, just so you know, all of these figures in the scene were actually there when I shot this. The little girl, the couple in the tidal pool, the boat, and the birds. Now, it did something very interesting with the little girl, for example. The way in which it blended her head into her one arm and then blended the shirt into the other arm was a very creative detail that I wouldn't have thought of on my own, and that really delighted me when I saw it. I feel like a kid on Christmas morning when I end up inspecting these works after the AI has done its thing. And then the couple themselves, they turned into this whole Art Deco fantasy. The woman looks like an Art Deco fashionista, and her boyfriend or husband or whatever looks to me like an Oscar statuette. Those are the sorts of moments of surprise that I just love working with this AI, it really feels more like a partnership or a collaboration than a simple filter. Last but not least, I want to talk about these two groupings at either end here. These are called Dreamscape details. They are 12-inch by 12-inch extractions from individual scenes that measured 8 feet high, in this case 12 feet wide. These are 4 curated details from a large dreamscape captured at Nymph Lake in Rocky Mountain National Park. And these 4 over here are from a scene originally printed at 8 feet high by 8 feet wide, a square piece, captured at Echo Canyon in Zion National Park. These 12-inch by 12-inch details are non-lit or front-lit. They can be hung on the wall or can be self-standing on a shelf. And that's it. That's what I'm showing here at Lunds Gallery here in Park City.
From studio to gallery, what a journey we've had with Daniel Ambrosi, who may be one of the only living artists ever to sell primary works at both Christie's and Sotheby's auction houses in the same year. What a year, Daniel. Thank you. Thank you for your time, your talent, your vision, and the beautiful things that you put into this world. I'm Mark Cook, and this is Bold Encounters. Join us next time to learn how to lead your organization and your own life's work even better than you do today. I look forward to seeing you.
Thank you for joining us to get leaders unstuck and thriving with their teams. You've heard a little bit about the power of bold encounters and leadership. Watch on. Go to full episodes with the iconic expert interviews at markspencercook.com/podcast. And please subscribe. My site takes you directly to YouTube video and podcast versions. Please make comments. Share this with your friends. Also, reach out to us to just brainstorm your priorities, challenges, events, or how Bold Encounters might help. Visit windfallpartners.com. Click the Let's Talk button without obligation and reach out. I look forward to speaking. Thank you for joining us. Now, let's lead with Bold Encounters today.